Good morning, everyone. Good Monday morning. Have encountered several people this week who have stopped me and just said that they've been enjoying these videos. And so I've kind of been wanting to do more of these and talk about things that I really love talking about, which is this idea of how do we feel empowered in our lives? How do we find our joy, our happiness? How do we see life really as a gift, even on those days when we're struggling? And so I've decided I'm going to kind of pick a topic, maybe weekly or just whenever it comes to me. And I'm going to just kind of do what Gabby Bernstein says, which is I'm going to riff about a topic. And so what I want to share with you today is, many of you know, oh, there's my cousin Heather from Washington, that I'm working on this happiness thing, and I have been for about the last 15 or 20 years. And I study people, and I interview people, and I research this particular topic because it's really close to my heart because of my own struggles that I've had in my life. And so many people don't know that, and that kind of came to a head in the last few weeks when I had done a video about a previous student, and I had gotten kind of emotional, and I had so many people reach out to me and they said, oh my gosh, like, you know, we see you as the strongest person. We couldn't believe you were crying. Like, it was so good for me to see you cry because, you know, you walk around and I just feel like you're this person on stilts. And to be, hi, Joanna. And to be honest, that really took me back because I have not always felt like a strong person, nor do I always feel like a strong person. And so it made me think that I needed to tell my story a little bit more about maybe why I have chosen to dive into all of this self-help for the last 15 or 20 years of my life. And it's funny, I remember a friend at one point, like, made me kind of feel wrong for, like, why are you always doing all this self-help? Why are you always reading these books? And at the time, I didn't really know. I just knew that I was really drawn to books like, you know, The Law of Attraction and ways to increase our happiness levels, because here's what I found, and here's the backstory to this. Some of you know this about me and some of you don't, but for years and years, I suffered greatly from panic disorder. It was very debilitating to me in so many ways. I, you know, was 20 years old and had trouble walking to my mailbox. To be honest with you, I had trouble being at home by myself for even 5 minutes. I just had suffered for many years. It really came about in my high school years that I had full-blown panic disorder, and we have since found out and known that it's a very genetic tendency on both sides of my family. I have cousins and aunts and uncles on both sides of the family who have struggled with this, and so for me, it completely derailed my life in so many ways, and I felt like a 2-year-old in a 20-year-old body who, you know, I had to call my mom sometimes and just have her talk me down from one of these. I couldn't go to Walmart hardly without shaking all over. I went to therapy, and, you know, one of my homework tasks was that I was to drive to Walmart and I was to walk to the back of the building there and touch the wall and then turn around and come back. And you wouldn't believe how hard that was for me. And so I did a lot of work to overcome and to deal with my panic disorder. But I tell you this because, you know, I have known darkness. I have known struggle. And I think that every single one of us has known darkness and struggle. And it's funny, I was listening to a book that Ashley Bruggenschmidt, who is the principal at Sharon Elementary, recently recommended to me. And it's about the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, and one of the teachers wrote about hope. And as I was running this morning, she said, you know, don't feel like your struggle is any less than someone else's because maybe it's not quite as tragic. And she said, you know, pain is pain, sadness is sadness, loss is loss. And in that struggle, and regardless of the struggles that we've had, and whether or not it compares to someone else's, it doesn't matter because it is our struggle, it is our pain, and it doesn't have to be compared to someone else's. And so that's how we become united, is when sometimes we are united in our struggles and in our pains. And so I will tell you that for me, I despised and hated my panic attacks for so many years because I felt like they completely derailed my life. I was kind of a vibrant, independent spirit. And then all of a sudden I was struck down by these. And like I said, I had trouble doing everything in my life. I wanted to go to IU and get my degree and maybe even move to a large city and be independent and not get married for a really long time. And instead, these panic attacks made me really like I was in a shell, and I just needed to find a safe person who could make me feel good and safe and would take care of me. And so I didn't go to IU. I went to USI, and I traveled back and forth every weekend. I came home so that I could feel safety in my parents' home. I struggled to go to classes. I ended up quitting after a year so that I could be back at home and try to keep the panic, in line. And all of this made me feel like just terrible. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't even behave and act like a normal person. And so I felt like everything in my life revolved around these, and that I missed many opportunities to do things that I really wanted to do. And so for many years, I felt weak because of those, and I felt cheated because of those. And what I began to discover, really, and that's exactly why I started digging into all of these books and all of the research about how do we improve ourselves regardless of our struggles, how do we make ourselves better. And so I started doing all this research, and I found great comfort in all of these books that I was reading, and I began to implement some of those practices. And not only that, I'll be 100% honest with you, I eventually went to a doctor who said it was a serotonin imbalance that was causing a lot of my panic disorder, and he put me on Zoloft, and I was, a completely different person. I was the old me again. I didn't struggle as much to do those things, and that was really freeing to reconnect with the inner part of who I was. But I continued to research because I wanted to implement these practices because I wanted more out of my life. And so, as I've dug, and that being said, folks, that doesn't mean I'm panic attack free. But what it does mean is that I now look back on those struggles, all the struggles that I've had. Everybody I know that's having struggles. I mean, just this weekend alone, I went to this beautiful wedding with these two brides who had the courage to marry one another here in Perry County, Indiana. And in part of their vows, they spoke a little bit about their struggles, how hard it was for them because they didn't fit into, the normal expectation of how you're supposed to behave. And then I turned around later and I saw someone there who, had recently lost her husband. And I just see that everywhere you look, you can see struggle. But more importantly, what I saw in the woman who I saw was there after losing her husband recently, and in those two brides, was I saw that every single time you get the opportunity to choose hope. And I think that is so important, that we get to choose hope, regardless of our struggles and tragedies and things that we've endured, that in every moment we get to choose hope. And so that's what I'm working at. I'm working at choosing hope. And I work at it daily. I will tell you all that, the happiness research says this, that 50% of a person's happiness is genetic. And it comes from your mom or your dad or a mixture of both. And there's nothing you can do about it. And we see this, right? You look around and there are like people who just have this bright light about them. They are super shiny. They kind of let things like roll off their shoulders. Even when there's trials and tribulations, somehow they can always shift to optimism. And it's like they're just naturally born to be that way. And then you see people who are very negative and very down and frown, and they kind of view life through this lens where they've kind of trained their brain, their brain automatically picks out all that's wrong. And each of us can swing back and forth between those two, but 50% of a person's happiness is genetic. And so you're kind of born with it. and you have this set baseline happiness level, and something good happens in your life and it goes up, but then it recalibrates after so many weeks or months, or something bad happens in your life and your happiness level drops, but then it does reset itself to whatever your baseline happiness level is. So that's 50% of your happiness. 10% of that pie chart, through the research, is your external circumstances. Only 10% of our happiness is based on what kind of home you live in, how much money you make, what kind of car you drive. All of those things are really only attributed to 10%. And we know this because if the richest people in the world were the happiest people, you know, that's just not true. And so only 10% of our happiness is based on our kind of external circumstances, so to speak. Now, when I share that statistic, many of you are already laughing because of the shoes, the pictures of shoes that you saw last week on Facebook. You know, my husband always says, you preach about this 10% happiness piece, but you have 72 pairs of shoes in our closet. And I tell him, you know, that I'm an anomaly when it comes to shoes. I think they contribute to more than 10% of my happiness, but maybe not. But anyways, and I will tell you that for people of poverty, it's more than 10%, because that stress does greatly contribute to their happiness levels. But for most of us, it's only 10%. But what I found through the years, folks, that has just, oh gosh darn, it's invigorated me, is that 40% of that pie chart is up for grabs. That each and every one of us have the ability to increase our happiness levels by 40%. And those are the practices that I have chosen to implement in my own life for the last 15 years. Does that mean that I am always the happiest person? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that I am not a work in progress myself? Trust me, I'm practicing it. Last week I had to practice happiness daily. It is a practice, but you know, at my age, which is, am I 42 or 43? I can't remember. I think I'm 43. No, I'm 42. At 42 years old, guys, I can tell you that I am closer to being my authentic self than I ever have been, and that I have learned to embrace a lot of life with much more joy. That doesn't mean that I still don't have struggles. And I see you, Miss Susie, saying that you remember when I had these panic attacks, when I was Natasha's 4th grade teacher. Yes, you know what? 3 weeks ago, I was driving to a school and I was on the interstate, and out of nowhere, I had this gigantic panic attack. I hadn't had one for a long time, but I had a huge panic attack. I literally thought I was going to die. I had feelings of disorientation and unreality, and I was sweating and my heart was beating and I was super nervous. I thought I was going to have to call someone. But I've learned how to push through that. And that's where all my training all these years came in to rescue me, because I just allowed the fear and I observed it. And was I scared shitless? I was. But let me tell you what, 30 minutes later, I pulled in front of the school and I gave a kick-ass presentation to 50 teachers. And so I tell you all this because I think that we have so many people out there who are struggling. I struggle with certain areas of my life still. But isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful to know that we get to choose hope? That every single day, regardless of what we're encountering, that opportunity is there to choose hope. And that's exactly what this teacher from Sandy Hook Elementary was talking about in her book this morning. That you either get to let those trials and tribulations define you and bring you down, or you get to choose hope. And for me, that has meant in the last few years, looking back at my panic disorder and actually being grateful for it. And it's hard to believe that I'm saying that, but I am grateful because they have become one of my biggest teachers in life. Guys, if you ever see me at Walmart, there's not a time that I don't walk out of Walmart. And almost every single time I say thank you, because that was easy. I could do it. I went in and shopped for an hour. The smallest things now, I am so observant of and grateful for. And in all honesty, It's these panic attacks that put me on the trajectory of my spirituality and all this self-help stuff and all these tools that I've used that I get to share now, even with teachers. You know, that's part of Strobel Education Workshops is I'm not just giving you some strategies for how to be a better writing teacher or how to be a better, you know, reading teacher. We put some happiness pieces in there for teachers because they need it. And I will tell you that as an educator myself, and a happiness coach, the very best thing that happens to me when I go and I present in front of teachers like I did a few weeks ago in Evansville is I had 3 teachers come back in like 20 to 30 minutes after the workshop. And they came back in all different, they didn't even know one another was coming in at different times, and they gave me a hug and they just said, thank you for helping me feel like I'm going to be okay. That what I'm doing, stepping into those classrooms 180 days a year, is worth something. Thank you for helping me remember that what I do is important. And you know, I think that my grandmother, my 92-year-old grandmother, she's really helped me accept like the shadow parts of myself, the parts that are imperfect. Like one of the things that she's taught me is that regardless of my mistakes and my failures, that and my mom too, she's done this as well. She's always rooting for me, but who I am matters. And that means even with my imperfections, even with my failures, even with my mistakes, at the end of the day, I'm still worth it. And I think that all of us need to remember that you are still worth it. So anyway, I am working on the first ever happiness retreat. I'm shooting really hard for next summer, where I want to talk about some of these practices and these tools and these principles of how we can all kind of up the vibration level of our life. So anyways, that's your Happy Monday live video from Kim Strobel. And I hope everyone has a really great week. And thanks so much for listening. I appreciate all the comments. I see different people were joining, and I didn't get to read all the comments, but I'll sure look forward to them after this video.